The morning my daughter ran away from her wedding, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that I could not name, a quiet warning that whispered through every breath I took, telling me that something was coming, something bigger than anything I had ever prepared my heart for. I had spent the whole week trying to convince myself that I wasn't nervous, that everything was under control, that my daughter was simply overwhelmed by the excitement of the day, but deep inside, a mother always knows when her child is hiding pain behind a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. As I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my Elley, I kept replaying the moment from the night before when she hugged me a little too tightly, a little too long, as if she was holding on to something she was afraid to lose. I chalked it up to wedding pressure, but now looking back I should have paid closer attention to how her hands trembled. The house was full of relatives moving around like bees in a hive, everyone laughing, everyone preparing, everyone celebrating. They kept telling me I had done well, that my daughter was lucky, that the man she was about to marry came from a good family, a respected family, a family that would secure her future. I smiled on the outside because that's what mothers do on days like that, but the truth is I had seen the way she looked at him sometimes, not with love, but with fear she tried to disguise as obedience. I thought it was pre-wedding stress. I thought she would settle into the marriage with time. I thought she simply needed reassurance. I never imagined she was plotting her escape. By the time we arrived at the venue, everything looked perfect. The flowers were arranged, guests were finding their seats, and the groom stood at the altar with a confidence that almost felt arrogant. Something about his expression unsettled me. The way his jaw clenched, the way he scanned the room like someone waiting for a victory parade rather than a bride. Still, I told myself to focus on my daughter, to pray for her, to trust that she knew what she was doing. But when I stepped into her dressing room, my entire body froze. The dress was still hanging untouched, her shoes neatly placed, the makeup chair empty, and on the table, the bouquet she was supposed to be holding lay abandoned like a secret she no longer wanted to carry. For a second I thought maybe she had stepped out, maybe she was with the makeup artist, maybe she was fixing something small. But the silence in that room felt wrong, like the air was holding its breath. My hands started shaking as I walked around, calling her name in a whisper I barely recognized. Then I saw it. The window slightly open, the curtains still swaying as if someone had passed through moments before. My heart began to pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My daughter didn't leave the room. She escaped it. I rushed outside, my eyes scanning every direction, my legs feeling too heavy to move fast enough. People kept stopping me to ask what was wrong, but I couldn't form the words. All I could think about was whether she was safe, whether she was alone, whether she was running from him, or running from something bigger than any of us understood. Then, as I reached the back of the venue, I saw the faintest outline of footsteps in the dust, leading toward the road as if she had run barefoot, desperate, determined. And right there, a fear I cannot explain swept through me, not because my daughter ran away, but because deep down, I knew she hadn't just fled a wedding. She had fled the truth she was too afraid to say out loud. And as I stood frozen, trying to gather myself, I didn't know that what she ran from was something that would shatter everything I believed about our family. The moment I realized my daughter had truly vanished from the venue, something inside me cracked in a way I cannot fully describe, a kind of silent tearing that started in my chest and spread through my entire body like cold water pouring into spaces I didn't know existed. I stood there outside the hall, staring at those faint footprints in the dust, and for a few seconds I felt too dizzy to breathe, as if the world around me had shifted its axis and left me suspended between fear and disbelief. Mothers prepare for many things, but they are never prepared for the moment their child runs from something she should be running toward, especially on a day meant to symbolize joy. As the wind brushed against my face, carrying the distant sound of wedding guests laughing inside, I felt an overwhelming loneliness settle on my shoulders, because I realized I was the only one who sensed the depth of what was happening. Everyone else would assume she was nervous, irresponsible, dramatic. But I felt it in my bones. This was not fear of marriage. This was fear of danger. I walked back inside with legs that trembled beneath me, trying to compose myself, telling my spirit to stay calm because panic would only make things worse. The groom's mother was the first to stop me, her heavily powdered face tightening into suspicion as she asked where my daughter was. The way she looked at me, as if I had personally orchestrated some kind of humiliation, made something sour rise in my throat. I told her my daughter needed a moment, but her eyes narrowed in a way that made my stomach twist. It was then I remembered the strange glances my daughter had exchanged with the groom's mother weeks earlier, moments I dismissed as normal wedding tension. Now, standing in that suffocating hallway, I realized there had always been something unsaid between them, something my daughter had been too afraid to share. Before I could gather my thoughts, the groom approached with heavy, irritated footsteps, his expression tightening with every breath. He asked where she was in a tone that didn't sound like a concerned fiancé but like a man whose possession had slipped out of his hands. The coldness in his eyes startled me, a kind of impatience that didn't match the situation, and for the first time I found myself wondering what kind of marriage my daughter would have been stepping into. He ran a hand through his hair aggressively, muttering under his breath, and I could feel his anger simmering. Something told me my daughter had seen this anger before, up close, in ways she had never confessed to me. I replayed countless small moments, her forced laughter, her distant eyes, the way she always defended him with too much conviction, and each one now felt like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. She hadn't been stressed. She had been scared. I excused myself and went back to her dressing room, hoping maybe she had returned quietly, but the room was still untouched, still echoing with her absence. I sat on the stool, staring at her dress hanging softly like a ghostly figure in the corner. That dress was supposed to carry her into a new life, but now it just symbolized the weight she had been trying to escape. My eyes fell on the small makeup bag she always carried, lying half open on the table. Something inside me urged me to check it, not out of intrusion but out of desperation to understand what she had been hiding. My hands shook as I reached inside, expecting to find something normal. A lipstick, a mirror, a compact powder. But instead my fingers brushed against something unexpected. A folded piece of paper. My heart began to race as I pulled it out. It was crumpled as if she had held it tightly at some point, maybe even cried into it. I unfolded it slowly, afraid of what I might see, and as the words came into view, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a note. It was a printed document. A medical report. And the date at the top was recent. I stared at the name of the hospital, the consultant's signature, and finally the diagnosis written clearly in bold letters, and the floor seemed to shift beneath me. For a moment I couldn't even blink. I read it once, twice, a third time, each line tightening a knot in my stomach until it felt hard to breathe. Why had she hidden this? Why had she not told me? Why was she carrying this alone? A sudden knock on the door jolted me out of the daze. I quickly folded the report, slipping it into my wrapper as the makeup artist peeked in nervously, asking if everything was all right. I nodded even though nothing was all right, not even close. The groom's relatives were beginning to murmur, their impatience spreading like smoke throughout the venue. I could feel eyes on me, judging, blaming, assuming the worst. But their suspicion meant nothing compared to the questions screaming inside my head. Where is my daughter? And what was she running from? I stepped outside again, scanning the area, my heart beating painfully against my ribs. Then I remembered the security cameras. The venue always recorded everything. Hope flickered in my chest as I hurried to the manager's office, explaining the situation with urgency. The manager hesitated, worried about privacy issues, but the look in my eyes must have told him this was no ordinary situation. He pulled up the feed from the corridor outside the dressing room. As the footage loaded, I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. There she was. My daughter. Standing at the door. Looking over her shoulder repeatedly, fear etched across her face. She kept checking something on her phone, pacing, breathing heavily as if bracing herself for something. I watched her pause in front of the mirror, whispering something to herself, maybe a prayer, maybe a goodbye, and the sight of her trembling made my chest tighten with helplessness so sharp I had to swallow to keep from breaking down. Then she grabbed her purse, opened the window, and slipped out quickly as if someone was coming behind her. But it was what happened next that sent chills through my entire body. A shadow appeared in the frame. A figure walking down the hallway, not rushing, not panicking, but moving with a slow, deliberate purpose. The figure stopped at my daughter's door, placed a hand on the knob and tried to open it. When they realized she wasn't inside, they stepped back and looked around. And although the camera didn't capture the face clearly, something about the posture made my stomach twist violently. It was someone familiar. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who had no reason to check that room. And in that moment, as I watched the silhouette linger for a few seconds before turning away, I felt a cold wave move through me because I knew, Whoever that person was, my daughter had been running from them. And the truth hiding behind that shadow was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than anything I had imagined. From the moment I saw that shadow on the security footage, a slow trembling started in my legs that I couldn't control, the kind of trembling that comes when your spirit recognizes a truth your mind is still trying to deny. I stood there staring at the screen long after the figure walked away, forcing my breathing to stay steady because there was something disturbingly familiar about the posture, the height, the way the person paused as if listening for movement behind the door. And the more I stared, the more a heavy dread began to rise inside me, curling around my chest like a tightening rope. I asked the manager to rewind the footage, then rewind it again, each replay making the coldness inside me grow thicker. I felt like someone had placed a hand on the back of my neck, pushing me gently toward a truth I wasn't ready for. If my daughter had been afraid enough to climb out through a window in her wedding dress, it meant the threat wasn't imagined. It was real. And it wasn't outside the family, it was inside. I thanked the manager and stepped out of the office, but the air in the hallway felt suffocating, thick with unspoken tension. Wedding guests were starting to notice the whispers, the nervous glances, the groom pacing at the far end of the corridor like a man on the edge of losing control. His mother hovered beside him, her lips tight, whispering something into his ear that made his jaw clench even harder. As I walked past them, I felt their eyes burning into me, but I didn't stop. I wasn't thinking about embarrassment anymore. I wasn't thinking about tradition or expectations or the chaos unfolding behind me. All I could think about was my child, my only daughter, out there somewhere, scared enough to run, brave enough to choose freedom, yet carrying something she felt she couldn't tell me. The medical report pressed against my skin beneath my clothing, its presence like a heartbeat reminding me that there was an entire piece of her life I had missed. I stepped outside into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. The air was warm, but my skin felt cold. I scanned the compound again, hoping for any sign, any clue, any person who might have seen her. The security guards shook their heads. The vendors outside were too busy to notice a bride slipping out. The driver waiting by the gate insisted he didn't see anyone pass. Her absence felt like a weight pressing against my ribcage. I walked toward the end of the driveway, feeling strangely drawn there, and as I approached the corner, I noticed something small on the ground. A bracelet. Her bracelet. The one she wore every day, the one I bought her 3 years ago when she graduated university, the one she never took off except to sleep. I bent down and picked it up, feeling its warmth in my palm, and my throat tightened painfully. This wasn't an accident. She must have dropped it while rushing. It was almost like a breadcrumb she didn't know she was leaving for me. I held the bracelet for a long moment, closing my eyes, recalling her smile, her laughter, the way she used to run into my room when she was little, jumping into my bed just to tell me about a dream or a new idea. When did that openness become secrets? When did that joy turn into silent fear? I opened my eyes and breathed out slowly. I needed to find her. But more than that, I needed to understand what she had discovered, and who she was hiding from. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number again for what felt like the 100th time. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and just as I prepared myself for voicemail, it connected. For a moment I didn't speak. I held my breath, listening to the faint static on the line, waiting for her voice. But no one spoke. I whispered her name softly, gently, afraid to scare her off. No answer. I heard movement though, small, shaky breaths, like someone was holding the phone but too afraid to talk. My heart clenched. I whispered again, telling her she wasn't in trouble, that I wasn't angry, that I only needed to know if she was safe. The breathing on the other end became uneven, almost like she was crying silently. Then suddenly the line cut off. My entire body went still. If she rejected the call, that was one thing. But this wasn't rejection. This was fear. Someone or something had frightened her enough to hang up abruptly. I tried calling back immediately, but this time it went straight to voicemail. I stood there for a moment, feeling the wind brush against my face as if the universe was trying to calm my shaking hands. I told myself she needed space, but deep down I knew she wasn't alone. Someone was with her. And that person didn't want her talking to me. As I walked back toward the venue, I noticed the groom standing near the entrance now, staring at his phone, his irritation simmering like heat rising from asphalt. When he saw me, he approached quickly, his expression sharp. He accused her of being dramatic, irresponsible, childish. He said she was embarrassing him. The words stung not because he said them but because he believed them so casually, so confidently. I watched him closely, every gesture, every twitch, every breath, and something inside me began to settle. He wasn't panicked about her safety. He was panicked about his pride. That told me everything. I walked past him without responding, and as I moved into the dressing room again, the silence hit me differently this time. It wasn't an absence, it was an echo. An echo of everything she had been holding inside. I sat down slowly, pulling the medical report out again, letting my eyes travel over the diagnosis one more time. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious. Serious enough to change her future. Serious enough to make someone angry. Serious enough to make her feel trapped. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Her sitting at the dining table 2 weeks earlier, staring at her food, her eyes swollen from crying, telling me she wished she could pause life for a moment, breathe differently, start again. I asked her what was wrong, but she brushed it off. I thought it was pre-wedding stress. But now that moment took on a new meaning, a new heaviness. I stood up, determination replacing the fear. If she was too scared to talk, I would find the person who knew why. And there was one person who always knew more than she let on. The groom's mother. She had been hovering like a shadow throughout the engagement, watching my daughter with eyes that held something more than judgment. Something like control. I stepped out of the room and found her near a group of relatives, whispering angrily, her voice sharp. When she saw me approaching, she straightened, her lips pressing together in a forced smile. I asked her calmly if she had spoken to my daughter recently. She hesitated for a moment too long. Her eyes flickered sideways. Her fingers tightened around her purse. And in that tiny moment I saw it, guilt. Or fear. Or both. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it and her expression changed, not visibly but enough for me to notice. She excused herself hastily and walked away, her steps quick, almost panicked. I followed her from a distance, watching her slip out the side door, glancing over her shoulder repeatedly. She stopped behind the building, answered the call, and spoke in a low whisper. I couldn't hear her words, but her tone was sharp, urgent, almost frantic. Then she said one sentence that made the bottom of my stomach fall. "She can't come back here. Not until we fix this." That was the moment I knew. My daughter hadn't run away from her wedding. She had run away from the truth they were trying desperately to hide. And I felt a sudden coldness wash over me as one terrifying thought settled into my mind with undeniable clarity. The truth wasn't just about the groom. It was about the entire family. And my daughter had discovered something dangerous enough to make all of them panic. The police officers finally left, their radios crackling as they walked away from the venue. Guests whispered in tight circles. The groom's family glared at me like I'd personally orchestrated the chaos. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to stand straight. I had only one thought: find my daughter. I drove straight home. The house was too quiet, too neat, too untouched. I looked into her room. Her jewelry box was open, a few pieces missing. Her favorite coat was gone. She had left with intention, not panic. Then something caught my eye. Her bedside drawer, slightly open. Inside was a folded note with my name written on it. My heart pounded against my ribs. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means everything has gone wrong. I'm not safe. And neither is the truth." My breath caught. What truth? I sat on her bed, gripping the note like it was alive. Then my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A shaky breath. Silence. "Mom, it's me." My body froze. "Emily? Where are you? Baby, please." "Mom, don't talk loud," she whispered. "He's looking for me." My heart hit the floor. "He? Who? Your husband-to-be? What's happening?" "Mom," her voice cracked. "He's not who we think he is. Emily, you're scaring me. He lied about everything, his job, his past, even his family. And Mom, I found something that proves." The line suddenly glitched. "Emily? Emily." "Mom, listen to me, don't trust." The call cut off completely. I stared at the screen, numb, shaking. What did she find? Who was looking for her? What had she stepped into? And most painfully, why didn't she tell me sooner? I stood up, tears filling my eyes, and whispered to the empty room. "Emmy, please. Come home. But deep in my chest I already knew. She wasn't coming home. Not yet. And whatever truth she'd found was darker than anything I'd ever imagined. I stood there frozen, staring at Daniel's mother as her words echoed in my mind. Your daughter will regret this. It didn't sound like anger anymore. Sounded like a threat. After she stormed out, I locked the door immediately. My hands were shaking. Something wasn't right. This wasn't normal wedding drama. This was deeper. Darker. Minutes later my phone buzzed again. My daughter. Her voice was trembling. I didn't run away because of cold feet. I took a shaky breath. Then why, sweetheart? What did you see? There was a long silence. Too long. Mom, she whispered, I found something in Daniel's room yesterday. Something I wasn't supposed to see. My heart dropped. What did you find? Another silence. Daniel isn't the man we think he is. Before I could speak, before I could breathe, I heard voices behind her. Footsteps. A door creaking. Someone entering wherever she was. Mom, I have to go. Wait. Are you safe? Who's there? But the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my entire body cold. Why was she whispering? Why did she sound terrified? Who walked into that room? And what truth did she uncover that was powerful enough to make her flee her own wedding? All I knew was one thing. If I didn't find her fast, something far worse than a runaway bride story was coming. And the truth she discovered might destroy more than just a wedding. Please follow me for no reason.